Hello and welcome to Candid Conversations. I'm Sandra Seapack. We look forward to bringing you informative as well as inspiring topics on Candid Conversations that you can find useful in your life. On today's show, we're going to talk about domestic violence and the impact it has on the lives of women and men as well as children. Our guests today are Barry Levy from the Westside Domestic Violence Network and also Miguel Angel Perez from Sojourn Services for Battered Women and their children, who will share some exceptional stories with all of us here today. First, though, I'm going to open up our discussion with my co-hosts, Becky Lantry and Dina Diamond, and I'm going to open it up by telling you a little story that happened to me just recently. I went into a fast food restaurant, and I was very uncomfortable by a customer who was in front of me in line who was berating and verbally abusing the employee that was serving her. She was yelling and screaming and telling her that, she wasn't doing a good job. And she was also, calling her some names, which made me feel very uncomfortable. So I just wondered how you would have handled that, both of you, and if I did the right thing by speaking up.
I would have spoke up. I'd have called for the manager, asked the manager to assist the employee in actually escorting the outraged woman out of the actual restaurant. I probably wouldn't allow her to come back.
There you go. How about you, Dina?
I would have stepped into, I would have went right to that irate customer and said, look, I understand. When you need a deep fried apple pie, you need a deep fried apple pie, but you need to calm down. There's a way to handle yourself in a business.
Right.
And Becky, I think you were right to go to the manager, but do you think the manager would have escorted the customer out?
I think the manager would have actually asked him to leave. Actually, most restaurants say we reserve the right to refuse service to anyone.
Well, and as a matter of fact, the manager did come over. He came over just briefly, and I explained that, this person was a little abusive.
A little?
Yeah, I mean, a little.
A lot.
A lot. And I was very uncomfortable as being another customer in the store. And the woman was mad, and she just walked out. I mean, she didn't have to be told to leave. She just left. But I did try to make a situation better. And I will tell you what I did. I went to the employee and I basically told her, I said, don't worry, it's okay. Take your time with me. I understand if you're, trying your best, don't worry about it. And she was so much better about that than, when I did that, because she was very upset.
Wow.
She was trying really hard. And I just, as a customer, it was very hard for me to see that. I wouldn't treat somebody that way. I wouldn't.
No, nobody should.
And it's just out of control and out of hand, and just telling her that everything was going to be okay.
Right.
Probably actually kind of really.
But on today's show, we're going to talk a little bit about domestic violence, and that's a little bit of like a verbal abusive kind of thing that can escalate and become even more so. And I'm just, wondering if that is the best thing to do, to stand up and say something when you see something like that.
You should always stand up and say something.
If you're in a safe environment, there's a popular show that's out right now that poses that same question every week. What would you do if you were in this situation?
Right.
And it's really sad that there are a lot of people who will just stand back and be voyeurs and watch what happens, and they won't stand up. But some people are meek, and they need somebody to just give them that extra push to stand up for themselves or to actually step in.
Right. Well, I wouldn't want to be treated that way, so I guess that's why I spoke out, and I was glad I did, but the customer was yelling at me now, so, I don't know if that was the best situation, but I did get my food, and, I did thank them, and I left.
You could handle it. The new employee couldn't.
No, and it was hard, though. But
what you did by going there after the fact
I know.
and consoling the employee, you changed her day.
Right.
She was having a really lousy day before you stepped up to that counter.
Well, I'm glad I shared this with you, and I'm glad that you shared my views on that, too.
Yes, for sure.
We're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back with our guest, Barry Levy. Stay right with us. Thanks.
Experience Highways Performance Space and Gallery.
I knew my journey would lead me to a place
where I'd find a highway that I could travel to the beat of my own drum. Right out the storm, 95 Joey died, but Deadly was born.
And there would be no limits to the vibrancy of my performance.
Join us each week at Highways Performance Space and Gallery and live without limits. Log on to highwaysperformance.org.
Who do you think you are?
I'm Mommy. You eat this. I'm Mommy. We have so much to do today, Joanne.
Don't you think you should pay more attention to the road?
No, because I'm Mommy.
What could possibly be so important that it's worth your life? The Santa Monica Fire Department wants you to keep the road safer. Don't text and drive. Put it down.
Oh, hi, Rosa.
Is it time for Mama to have our baby?
No, sweetie, it's time for you to get a checkup.
A checkup? Can I go, please?
The services of Women in Children's Hospital are integrated into the new LAC USC Healthcare Network, where superior medical professionals provide clinical research and complete patient care for your community.
Ouch.
Our staff is dedicated to you and your family.
Our first guest today is Barry Levy from the Westside Domestic Violence Network here in West LA, and also the author of In Love and in Danger. Ms. Levy is also a teacher at the School of Social Welfare at UCLA and is a psychotherapist in private practice. She has more than 30 years of experience in the field of domestic violence. Hi, Barry, and welcome to Candid Conversations. We're so happy that you're joining us today. Domestic violence covers a wide spectrum. So just what are we talking about when we say domestic violence? That covers such a wide range of things.
What I'd like to talk about today is a pattern in a relationship, in an intimate relationship between a man and a woman, or two women or two men, in which one person is controlling, intimidating, frightening, demeaning, putting down, basically trying to get the partner to be exclusively close to them and not to anybody else. And that pattern is abusive when that controlling behavior includes things like restricting them, not letting their partner go out and do things on their own, commenting on how they dress, not letting them wear certain things, not letting them spend the money that it comes into the household if they're a married couple or a couple that lives together, checking up on them, following them, stalking them, criticizing, constantly criticizing. And it's not just mild criticizing, it's explosive, rageful attacks, verbal attacks, name-calling, criticizing that goes on and on and on in a relentless way that kind of pounds down the ego and the self-esteem of the person who's the target of it.
So, Dina, go ahead. I know you wanted to jump in. And
Well, when you're talking about controlling, and you gave really great examples, are these women aware of that? Are they oblivious to what's going on?
Well, when you're the target of that kind of behavior, and this is on the part of somebody you care about, right? There's a reason that you are with this person. You keep trying to believe that this person doesn't really mean to hurt you. You try to understand what they need and what their vulnerabilities are, and that they love you very much, or that they care about you enough to not want you to suffer. So you keep trying to convince yourself that they're not really trying to hurt you. So you feel controlled. Little by little, the women that I know who've been through this talk about how they have a hard time making decisions for themselves. They have a hard time thinking clearly about what's going on in their lives. They have a hard time acting to take care of themselves because they're always interfered with. How do I know if I go out with my friends that my boyfriend isn't going to get so angry with me that he'll explode at me, he'll be enraged with me, maybe he'll hit me, maybe he'll follow me and he'll accuse me of being with some guy. And so they, little by little, they stop doing the things that get this partner upset.
But wouldn't you agree that I think that many times, especially with teen girls and young girls, they may not even know this is happening. They may not even see this as a domestic violence issue.
What happens, especially with teenagers, and that's one of the things that I think is more common for teens than adults, is that you have an idea, this romantic idea, that this guy or this girl loves me so much that they don't want me to talk to anybody else. They want me all to themselves. Now, isn't that romantic?
Yeah, they want them from their parents, from their friends. They just want to isolate them from the whole world. But here's this teenager going, oh, he loves me so much that he just won't let me hang out with my friends. Oh, he's not really jealous, but they really don't get the big picture.
And it feels romantic, it feels special.
In the beginning.
In the beginning.
That's the key.
And then what happens, Sandra, is after some period of time goes by, anybody in this situation would begin to feel like, wait, I want to see my friends again. I haven't seen them for a long time. I've got to go on with my life the way it was before I met this person.
It's even
but I don't want the relationship to go away.
Right.
And
so
like
how do you do
the
both?
little things start to really become a bigger issue now. When you can't see your friends, like, teenagers want to be with their friends and do things together, and now the boyfriend or the...
wants their exclusive attention.
Right.
And Becky, you use the word isolation.
Yes.
That's the point. The point is that this person who's using this kind of behavior, who's being controlling, has some need to have the exclusive attention of this person that they care about. And so they isolate them. And little by little, the point of view that you have when you're in a relationship like this is that, well, they must be right. They love me so much. They must be right. I've had teenage girls tell me, well, maybe I do dress like a slut. My boyfriend wouldn't say that if it weren't true. He cares about me too much to hurt my feelings like that. And little by little, they question themselves more and more and more. And then their boyfriends have more control over them.
And they lose confidence, right?
And they also wind up giving up the ways in which they make decisions that are good for them.
Okay.
But does it start with verbal and then become physical?
Yes. Usually it starts with emotional and psychological manipulation and control. Sometimes that includes verbal abuse, what I mean by that is lashing out with nasty language, verbal attacks, really harsh criticism. But the emotional abuse can seem almost loving, like, oh, don't go, sweetie. I need you here. Oh, but my friends are waiting for me. You're going to go out looking like that?
Right.
Well, I thought you liked this blouse. Yes, but only when I'm the only one who can see it. And then the self-doubt begins, and oh, he really wants me here. And little by little, she gives up things that are important to her, stops going to her dance class, stops seeing her friends. The more control he gets, the more abusive he gets. It works.
Does she internalize that as fear? Does she realize it's fear?
She becomes afraid. And sometimes, you keep asking a good question. How much does anybody who's in this realize the extent to which they're being hurt? And I think that some people do realize that this is really awful. It's an awful experience. They don't like it. They strain against it. They try to find ways to get around the control. And others try to make everything better. Well, if I only behave this way or that way, then he won't get so mad. And they keep trying to make things better, and they don't realize how bad it really is.
But they're
until something happens in which they really are hurt.
The intimidation factor is still there. They're still intimidated. The confidence level is,
And a lot of the time, what happens with both the adults and teens is that something does happen. Either the physical violence starts, or you miss out on something really important to you, or something does happen, or you realize that you're failing in school, or when you go to work, you can't get your work done because your husband or boyfriend is on the phone with you constantly checking up on you. And you realize that it's interfering with other parts of your life, and you know something's wrong.
Now, how often do they get out?
Most of the time.
How often do they realize that this is actually a form of torture and really get out?
Sounds like such a simple question, right? Getting out means a lot of different things. So some of the women that I talk to have a plan for getting out. They're not leaving now, but they know they have to ultimately, and they're trying to keep the peace until they have the strength that they need, the resources they need to be able to manage outside
when you have a family, you
relationship.
can't just uproot everybody. You've got kids to take care of. Many women stay for the kids. They don't want to get out right away.
And the first effort is to try to figure out how to get the abuse to stop.
Oh yeah.
Right? So maybe we'll get counseling, or maybe we'll do something that we can work it out somehow.
But that amounts to, you told somebody, so now it's going to be worse.
Sometimes that's true, and sometimes if you tell somebody, the scrutiny or the kind of, oh, now other people know what you're doing and they behave better. There's no one answer in terms of how somebody deals with this that works for everybody. But beginning to think for yourself about what works in your situation, that's the most important step.
We want to talk just quickly before you go about your book.
Thank you.
And what you've mentioned in your book certainly addresses a lot of what we've been discussing and talking about. And I just wondered, when parents now read your book, what will they get from it?
Mostly, my co-author, Patty Giggins, and I have talked with so many parents about how they can recognize if something's wrong in their teenage son's or daughter's relationship. Is your son treating his or his girlfriend in a way that's abusive or could become abusive? Is your daughter treating her boyfriend in a way that's abusive? Are they being abused? What are the signs you can notice that will help you pay attention? The other thing we talk about is then what do you do about it? How do you talk to teenagers about their relationships?
Can you do something about it?
There's a lot that parents can do.
There is.
Parents have a lot of influence over
because,
what goes on with their teens.
You know, a lot of times kids will say, "Oh, don't bother me," or, you know, "Mom,
of course they do.
You're overreacting. It's not that way." It's
you
not
must
that
know
way.
my kids.
But usually that's what teenagers will say. You know, they'll say, "Oh, you're overreacting. This is not the case. It's not happening."
And leave me alone. I can handle it myself.
Right.
Mom, you're in my space.
That's
Get
right.
out.
Right.
Well, I want to thank you so much, Barry, for joining us today. You've given us some great tips and advice for, you know, all of us out there who may want to know more about domestic violence and recognizing the signs of it. So I thank you very much for joining us today.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank
Very
you.
good.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Stay with us. We're going to be right back right after this brief message.
I thought I had everything under control. Then, one day, something happened. I didn't know how to stop it. I didn't know there was help. Until someone told me.
Providing access to justice, the Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles can help with domestic violence issues, eviction defense, government benefits, immigration, and other civil legal issues.
Hey, Mom. Yes, I'm home. Saved you some dinner.
Plan now for a major earthquake. Contact the Santa Monica Office of Emergency Management. Don't be caught in the dark.
Even if a signal indicates it's safe to walk, it's never safe unless drivers see you. Last year, 113 pedestrians were injured in Santa Monica. You don't have to go to extremes to get a driver's attention. It just takes a little eye contact. Take the right steps to be safe. Watch the road.
Although many see domestic violence as only a woman's issue, it can and does affect many men and boys in our society. Our next guest today is Miguel Angel Perez, the program coordinator who oversees the Male Prevention Violence Project at Sojourn Services for battered women and their children. Mr. Perez works with Sojourn's teen education program, which focuses on teen dating violence, bullying, as well as gang violence. The program makes a conscious effort to end the cycle of such violence and change the social norm regarding violence and men. Miguel, thank you so much for joining us today on Candid Conversations.
Thank you. Hi, Miguel.
Hi,
Thank
Miguel.
you. Thank you, Becky, Dina, and Sandra for having me. It's good to be here.
Great. We're going to start off a topic. I'm a mother. I have a son, and I really want to find out if there's things parents can do early on when children are younger, especially boys. If we can make a difference to end domestic violence later in lives as kids develop. Are there things we can do as parents now?
Sure, we could, as parents, allow our boys and girls to have emotional freedom of expression, because quite often boys are allowed certain emotions and girls are allowed different emotions.
Can you give us some examples?
Oh, you know the old saying, boys don't cry?
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me like a man.
Right.
When the boy is 4 years old or
Sure.
3 years old.
Right.
So that's a good start. There's another good start. We could not hit our kids. Not that hitting is the only form of violence. Of course, violence is on a spectrum, but that's a good place to start as well, I would say.
Okay.
And what would you use as a tool to actually initiate things like no violence for children that young?
As a tool for, I'm not exactly sure what you mean, what we could use as a tool. We could talk with our kids about aggression and why they feel that way, and maybe validate that and not promote it or encourage it. So that could just be an easy way of doing it, not necessarily a tool, but just
Well, maybe controlling,
validate it.
like kids sometimes will get angry, maybe throw their toys or something like that. I mean, I think you can maybe control maybe the anger a little bit and redirect it. But I think, you know, it's important, I think, that early intervention, early on in children's lives, that they also see good examples from family members. Would you touch on that a little bit too?
Well, that's a great point, and that is another tool. We could model the behavior. We could respect our wives and our girlfriends and our female coworkers and not try to dominate space in a physical way, or expect not expect our kids to think they're going to figure out how to not be violent if we don't show them how. So we have to embody it.
When you're talking about showing them violence, I don't know if you saw the story about a college-age young man, decided to recreate his favorite video game, where he carjacked a car with a woman in it. Now, do you think that the media, with games and television and movies, all those images, are they creating a violent society in our young men?
I think that media is a reflection of our society, but there is a study being conducted right now at Ohio State University, and they've found that violent video games don't necessarily make people more violent, but they do make people more aggressive and less empathetic for victims of violence. So playing those games does have a direct cause on people's behavior.
So as parents, as siblings, as friends, we shouldn't encourage those as gifts, things to have in their lives. Should we take away the G.I. Joe? Should we take away the violent video games?
Well, I wouldn't buy that video game for my kids or my nephews. I don't have kids, but if I had kids, I wouldn't buy that game for them. But if they were adamant about playing it and I knew they were going to play it somewhere else, I would ask questions about that game and what that game is teaching them and what kind of an effect it's having on them.
Well, I know that you work with a lot of at-risk teens, a lot of at-risk youth. So what are some of the things that you teach in your program and some of the things that you kind of encourage for younger people?
Well, we try to empower them. So we don't try to come in as experts in their lives and tell them, oh, this is what's going on with you.
Okay.
We want to learn from them and then discuss scenarios and how they can react differently, or as opposed to reacting, respond in a more creative and safe way.
Can you give an example? Sorry, go ahead.
How long does it take you to learn to actually study, say, for instance, one child, and figure out where he's really at as far as being violent, becoming violent, or being calm and staying calm?
Well, everybody's different, right? So it depends on how much that kid or young person is willing to disclose. But we use theater as a tool. So show us what you're experiencing. Let's talk about it first, and then let's create a scene around it.
So they can act out maybe their aggression or their behavior, and that might give you a little bit more insight as to why they're acting that way or being that way.
Right, and then we can work together as a community or as a class to come up with different outcomes.
Can kids change? Can even teenagers, can they change?
Sure, we
can. Can they change that behavior pattern?
Yeah, we can all change, but the youth are not going to change until we, as leaders in our community, embody it and model it and stand up for it.
Well, speaking of that, as a community, are we supposed to step in when we see violent behavior? Years ago when I was 18, I was walking down the street and two young men walked towards me, started with the hey baby, that stuff. As I walked by, they grabbed my rear end. So I spun around, how dare you, keep your hands to yourself. And he slowly, calmly lifted his t-shirt to show me the handgun in his waistband. I thought I was in a safe environment to do that. I was in a strip mall. I quickly dashed into the closest store, and he eyeballed me the whole time, and he just sat on the hood of my car staring at me for a few moments laughing. I thought it was a safe environment. Nobody was there to help me. So when do we know that we can not just be bystanders, but actually step in and help somebody when we see this?
Well, first of all, that is a horrific experience, and I don't think anybody should have to go through that.
Absolutely.
And I think at that point, the best thing someone can do is maybe call the police. But we're trying to work with people way before that happens.
How
at
young?
the root, well, as young as we can, but what we're trying to do is we're trying to challenge attitudes, sexist attitudes, right? Like, oh, so you're making these jokes about women, and why are you making those jokes? Because that guy who did that to you may have been constantly making fun of women and claiming women to be property, and he was never challenged. So we're trying to get to those people before it actually escalates and you have to experience what you experienced.
Do you think this is something that should be taught in a school environment?
Absolutely. If the boys in Steubenville, Ohio would have learned from their football coaches and their PE coaches and their math teachers and the administration on creative ways of being upstanders, we may have not ever heard about that because it would have never happened.
Right, and a lot of the role models, it starts at home. Again, we go back to that same thing. Many of these boys or, teens maybe don't have a strong role model to follow, or the role model they're following isn't such a good one, and that can lead to the pattern that they're showing in aggression and the behavior problems. Right. So, I think that sort of lends itself to becoming a bigger problem later on with domestic violence.
What are 3 things that we can do as parents, as mothers, as women, to teach our boys at a young age? What are 3 things, no pun intended, that we can beat into them so that they can realize this is something, a negative, something that you repetitively see coming out of these children? What's something that you constantly see that is an issue that we can definitely get to the heart of when they're young, when they're 3, 4, and 5?
Well, one thing is a healthy respect for women and for men in general, and not to associate being a man with being violent, and also understanding that true power does not come from having power over other people, specifically women, but having power and the courage to work towards justice in a more equal society.
Okay, sounds good.
Kindergarten
I think,
wouldn't be too young.
No, absolutely not. Let's try as early as possible.
I must say, you've given us a lot of information today and a lot of insight as to what we can do, all of us, as collective as a society, to make the changes and make boys into better men. I think that's really the thing that we really want to recognize. Thank you so much for being with us today, Miguel.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Miguel.
Domestic violence is an issue we all need to be more informed about and recognize early on. Hopefully, we have given you a closer look at what can be done to prevent it and learn how to end the cycle. The effects domestic violence has on both women and men, and also children, is alarming. But with help and guidance, change can happen and does. I want to thank both of our guests today, Barry Levy and Miguel Perez, for being with us on the show today. And on behalf of my co-hosts, Becky Lantry and Dina Diamond, I'm Sandra Seapak. I'd especially like to thank you for joining us, too. We'll see you next time on Candid Conversations.